Okay. Do this, huh? So yeah. Sheila, so click the link. Sawa, yes. Juma Sheila na log on.
Intervening
So
in
the
the
books that
debate
you
to
sent me are the
allow
ones you're dealing with.
Ati what, baby?
This one that you sent me, the names that you sent me,
Sheila ameingia kwanza deal na can they hear? Cornell. That's not Malombe, that's Cornell.
Number one here.
Cornell. Cornell, can you hear?
I can hear.
Okay. So, number one, weka simu on landscape.
Nataka kuswitch kwa laptop. See, that will work.
Okay, sawa. Sawa.
Tutachoka, itakuwa tuko hivi. Sawa.
Alafu Juma, do you want both mics to be on? Mic ya X, mic ya nini? So sasa akiongea kwa X pesa atakuwa akisikika kwa X. So akae mute kwa space. So kwa space akue on na kwa laptop pia akue mic on. So itakuwa na nini? Mi na control mbio, lakini ule akiwa speaker ameweka atakuwa mic yake iko on kwa space. Na pia itakuwa on kwa laptop. There'll be two, itakuwa na feed mbili na speaker yake ya laptop pia itakuwa on.
Hii mute akiongea mute ile ya speaker. Mute ile ya level ikuwe 0 ndio isikuje.
So saa zote amekuwa mute kwa speaker. Unasikia? Cornell, unasikia? So bwana angalia kama Sheila amelogin. Anaingia kwa laptop. Wamemaliza kuongea wote?
And get seated for the session.
For intervening in the debate.
Hi, Sheila.
Hi, Eric. As I said, this is not where I'll be. I'm trying to get home.
Hi, can you hear?
Yes, I can hear you.
Unmute your mic. Okay, let's go. Hi. Have you muted your mic, Sheila? Can't hear you. Can't hear you yet. Yes, that's okay. I can hear you now. So you're on your phone, right? Okay. Do this when you get home. We'll start with the others. I can't hear you, Sheila. So it's all right. We'll start with the others, and then you log on. You log on onto Xspace. What's your X handle? What's your X handle? Text me. Mm-hmm. Okay. Sawa. You can text me as well. Okay. I see you later, Sheila. Hiyo kitu tutakuwa na issues za nini? I'm starting this thing in 3 minutes. Hello.
Hey, just a quick one. So I'm asking you, am I logging onto Xspace or logging onto that live stream you sent?
Both.
How do I log onto both?
You just get onto X and start your nini and get onto space.
Okay, so this one I will have to log on again. Let me get home.
Yeah.
But Xspace I'm logging on right now, so I start listening.
Okay.
So when I get home, I log on to that one as well.
Sawa. If you get home and you can have your laptop.
Yes, that's the thing. I want to get my laptop on.
Okay, but then you keep your laptop muted.
Yes.
Yeah. So you keep your laptop muted, then you just follow everything from where you're following the Xspace. That's what you listen from.
Okay.
And then you keep your laptop muted, but when you're talking, you switch on your mic on the laptop.
When I'm talking, I switch on the mic on the laptop.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, fine, thanks.
Hi.
So you can
well in that office. And faced a lot of challenges. Mr. Speaker, to you, I want to be grateful to you again, once more. We have interacted a lot. We started in the opposition, working together. Of course, I found you in the government. Then we worked in the opposition. When we were facing a lot of frustration, Mr. Speaker, you remember one time I had to save you up there when some MPs wanted to kill you. And Mr. Speaker, I did my best to save you. But today, interestingly, we are finding ourselves somewhere again. So I just
strangely, one of those who attacked me is in this house.
Yes.
And it's a lady.
But in the spirit of forgiveness, Mr. Speaker, I want to just conclude by...
And she's my very good friend, I must say.
I want to give a parting shot, Mr. Speaker. If by any chance I offended anyone of you, all members, through my actions, I kindly ask for forgiveness. Equally, for all those who wronged me, I forgive you. And by the way, I don't even see. None of you actually wronged me. So, but if there is any who I may have forgotten, I forgive you. Thank you very much. Mr. Speaker, it's a very emotional moment. Imagine a place you have called home for 17 years, continuously. Now you are leaving to another uncharted waters. May I pray that God bless Kenya and God bless National Assembly of the Republic of Kenya. Thank you.
Honorable members, I don't want to open any debate on this. On order, on behalf of the House, I'll give the leader of minority incoming 2 minutes and the leader of majority 2 minutes. If we open debate, each one of you has accolades for your colleagues. We'll come to that. We'll come to that. What is your point of order, Patrick? Commissioner Macau?
Mr. Speaker, with a lot of respects to Honorable Wandai and Honorable Badi, I listened to their very beautiful speeches. Honorable Speaker, the 12th Parliament who were in this House as Wiper Party. We supported Badi as the leader of minority in this House. We have supported Wandai. In their speech, Mr. Speaker, they've not even mentioned or appreciated Wiper members of Parliament who have been here, supported them relentlessly, Mr. Chairman.
You've made your point.
Mr. Speaker, is it possible for them to give them a second just to appreciate members of Wiper Party in this House, Mr. Speaker?
Order. Honorable Macau.
Honestly.
Commissioner Macau, take your seat. Order, honorable members. Honorable Macau, in law we say, expressio unias est excluso alteras. Meaning, expressio unias est excluso alteras. To specify one is to exclude another. So for them not to have mentioned you is neither here nor there. Don't solicit to be mentioned. Order, honorable members. Order, Shakil. Take your seat. Junet, you have 2 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, today is a bit heavy day for me, Mr. Speaker, because the people this House is losing today, Mr. Speaker, who are going to the executive, are people I have worked with very closely, Mr. Speaker. Honorable Mbadi was our minority leader in the 12th Parliament, and I was his whip, Mr. Speaker. Honorable Wandai is the outgoing minority leader, and I was his whip, Mr. Speaker. These are two gentlemen that I have worked with very closely in the House and at the party level, Mr. Speaker. And I am very sad because we will miss their leadership. We will miss their guidance, Mr. Speaker, as a minority side and at the party level, Mr. Speaker. Because, Mr. Speaker, these two members of parliament have really mentored many members of parliament on our side, Mr. Speaker. So, Mr. Speaker, I want to wish them well. I want to tell them that we will hold the fort here if they leave us behind. Mr. Speaker, Honorable Mbadi is is amazing person, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, Mbadi has been the chairman of our party for the last 10 years. And he has guided this party in a manner that there were very little disputes, Mr. Speaker, in the party. And for members of a huge party like ODM, a national party like ODM, to have faith in someone, Mr. Speaker, it means a lot. It tells you what kind of a leader he is, Mr. Speaker. Coming back to the minority leader, Mr. Speaker, whom I've worked with him the last 2 years as the minority leader, Mr. Speaker, I can say this without fear of contradiction, that he's a resolute leader, Mr. Speaker, a man who's very consultative, Mr. Speaker, a leader who consults on each and every issue that is before the House, Mr. Speaker, a leader who knew how to interact with his members, Mr. Speaker. And Mr. Speaker, the other day when he was speaking here, when he appeared, I mean, before the vetting committee, my heart went a bit, almost missed a second, Mr. Speaker, because I saw I will be lonely in this house, Mr. Speaker, as the whip, Mr. Speaker. But having said, Mr. Speaker, they have to go and serve the people of Kenya. I can tell you, when the nominees who came from the ODM appeared, Mr. Speaker, before the vetting committee, I was very proud, Mr. Speaker.
Good evening, everybody. Thank you very much for joining us in this conversation tonight, the public's reaction to Ruto's new cabinet. My name is Eric Latif, and I'm here with Ndu Okoro.
How are you doing, Eric?
Good. Very well. So we've seen what's happened in Parliament this afternoon. The National Assembly Committee on Appointments has handed in its report, and they have basically recommended the approval of 19 of the people that they vetted and recommended the rejection of 1. So just before we went on air on this X Space and YouTube and Facebook, what we saw was the National Assembly then voting by acclamation to approve the report, to approve the 19.
Right.
And the 19 included 2 who are still members of parliament up to now as we speak, the Honorable Pio Wandai and John Mbadi. And now they've been given an opportunity, after parliament has approved them to be appointed. Now what you're hearing in the background is the 2 MPs have been given an opportunity to say goodbye to the House. Pio and I started, and now it's John Mbadi who's just been speaking.
Right. Interesting, because both of them have been in that house for a while. I mean, we're looking at a combined almost 30 years as members of parliament, and to say the goodbye, taking up another seat now. So I think that's currently what's going on. It should be wrapping up in a bit. But looking at a situation where maybe unexpected for quite a number of them, or rather, at least for those 2 who have to say goodbye in the manner in which they do. Again, giving rise to its clarity that this entire process then has been given a big nod, and that the vote will probably go in one direction.
Yeah.
And so for them to say goodbye in the manner, or even be given the opportunity to say goodbye, then it tells you a number of things, and which we probably were able to predict from some time ago. Right.
What we've seen then is the recommendation to reject 1 member. Yeah. And the next thing that's about to happen in Parliament is members of Parliament are now going to. So the Speaker asked those who agree with the committee to reject the nomination of the nominee cabinet secretary, and there was almost an equal number of an equal amount of the A's and the nays by acclamation. So the next thing they're going to do is division. So members are going to vote one by another to see whether they are then going to approve the rejection of the nominee.
I think important to understand, why do they need to do that?
But do they need to do it?
Yes. Why do they need to go via? I mean, to say, do we uphold the rejection? Yes or no? And then, depending on what the majority vote is after that, then you can say, okay, either rejection upheld or a need to come back and say, appoint this person, or essentially approve the nomination of this person.
So the importance of it is, I mean, that's a procedure of the House.
Right.
So the vote is first of all taken when they're taking the vote by acclamation, and if the speaker or the person in the chair hears like the majority of the acclamation is on the ayes, then say the ayes has it. If they hear that the overwhelming majority of the votes by acclamation in the House are nays, then they say the nays have it. And if they hear that there's almost an equal number, then they just pick one. They just say the ayes have it or the nays
Oh,
have
the
it.
nays have it.
Now, if the speaker says the ayes have it, and there are very many people who felt nay and who said nay, they all rise. So then the speaker looks and sees, okay, I can see there's a good number of members who've stood up who are saying, no, we're not on the ayes that you've just said. So then the speaker says, all right, so we have got to go for division. And division now is where members vote individually. All the members who are present cast their individual ballot vote to say, so now we are going to count of the members in the House, how many voted yes and how many voted no. The previous one is just, by acclamation.
Right, via acclamation. All right. So it'll be an interesting evening. We do not, well, essentially now going to the point where the vote will be called in a short while. The Speaker of the House was basically preparing himself to have members of Parliament make that very crucial vote, but he wanted to give an opportunity to these two gentlemen to say essentially goodbye and give a roundup of maybe what they've done over the last 17 years for Opio Wandai, and almost equal in number to John Badi.
Yep.
And so going into the vote, it'll be interesting to see what happens, because we're looking at maybe calling it an early night. Yeah.
Let's just go back into the House for a bit, Juma, our technical director. Let's just go back into the House for a bit and hear.
People who are experts in their own fields, Mr. Speaker. People who know what they want to achieve. People who have a vision. People who will make sure that our party and our people are held high, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I want to conclude by saying this.
But we represent those people that you are going out to serve. We shall oversight you without fear, without favor, whether you came from this House or you are among those of your colleagues who are coming from the private sector. Honorable Speaker, as I conclude, allow me to take this opportunity to thank His Excellency the President for seeing beyond our political divide, for putting the nation ahead of all our political inclinations, Honorable Speaker. Difficult times like this our country is going through economically, difficult times as the world is going through, Honorable Speaker, I was saying earlier, if you look at all corners of the world, from the Far East to Asia, to the West in Europe, and the UK, as I mentioned, the whole world looks like is in turmoil. It calls great leaders, like the Honorable, His Excellency, Dr. William Ruto, and the Right Honorable, His Excellency, Raila Amolo Odinga, to see beyond their regions, to see beyond their political inclinations and parties, and put the nation ahead of every other consideration, Honorable Speaker. How I wish and how I pray that those of us here as leaders, and even those who are outside this House, Honorable Speaker, as leaders, we will always put our country ahead of our selfish and parochial interests and politics at times, and put the nation first. With those few remarks, Honorable Speaker, allow me on behalf of the House to wish the Honorable Opio Wandai and my brother John Badi all the best, as we say at the Alliance High School. Be strong to serve. Serve the nation diligently.
Thank you, honorable members. We're coming towards the end of that session. Honorable Milemba, you wanted to say something, but I have passed that. Allow me not to give you. Honorable members, I have a communication in furtherance of what we have done. This is on changes in the minority party leadership. Honorable members, Standing Order 21 provides for the election of a member as the leader of the minority party by the second largest party or coalition of parties in the National Assembly. Additionally, Standing Order 20A provides for the designation of parliamentary parties, leaders, and whips. Honorable members, and pursuant to the provision of Standing Orders 24 and 20A5, I wish to inform the House that I have received a letter from the Minority Party Whip communicating that the Azimio Coalition held a parliamentary group meeting on 6th August 2024 in Committee Room number 12, Main Parliament Building, to consider the election of the leader of the Minority Party and the Minority Party Whip in the National Assembly. The letter conveys that the meeting, which was attended by members of the coalition in the National Assembly and the Senate, elected the Honorable Junet Mohammed CBS MP as the leader of the Minority Party in the National Assembly, and 2, the Honorable Millie Odhiambo MP as the Minority Whip in the National Assembly. Honorable members, the Minority Party Whip has also attached the minutes of the proceedings of the meeting, thereby complying with the provisions of the standing orders and the precedents set by the House in such matters. In this regard, and pursuant to the provisions of Standing Order 24, I wish to convey to the House the changes in the leadership of the Minority Party. The changes take effect from today, 7th August 2024, and affect all other offices and committee memberships designated for the leader of the Minority Party and the Minority Party Whip. This includes the House Business Committee, the Committee on Selection, the Committee on Appointments, and the Liaison Committee. Honorable members, on behalf of the House, and indeed on my own behalf, I take this opportunity to congratulate the Honorable Junet Mohammed, CBS MP, and the Honorable Millie Odhiambo MP on their election to the respective parliamentary leadership offices. I wish them well in their new roles. I also take this opportunity to sincerely thank the Honorable Opio and EGH MP for diligently effectively carrying out his duties as leader of the Minority Party since 2022. We wish the Honorable Wandai success in his future endeavors as he serves the nation. The House is accordingly guided. Lastly, I also wish to, on behalf of myself, the Office of the Speaker, and indeed the entire Parliament, congratulate the Honorable Wandai, the Honorable John Badi, for the enormous responsibility now placed on their shoulders, together with the rest of their colleagues who have been approved by this House, to go and carry out the duty of helping the President and the entire Cabinet to move this country forward. Like everybody has said, you are not ministers of any party. You are ministers of the Republic of Kenya. And you are going to work for the people of the Republic of Kenya. I want to see you in Turkana. I want to see you in Lamu. I want to see you in Kwale. I want to see you in Kiambu. I want to see you in Narok. I want to see you everywhere, in Trans Nzoia, wherever, so that the and having interacted with your colleagues. I would be the saddest speaker in the history of the country to hear from members coming to me to complain that you can't open your doors for them, to complain that you can't take their calls, to complain that you can't return their calls, and to complain that you can't even attend to the issues they bring to you. Because you, more than anybody else, know what members of parliament go through. And you know what to do in response to issues that they require. So go out there and set the pace, mend those cabinet ministers who have not had the opportunity to come to this House on how you can all deal with members of parliament as they legislate, represent, and oversight you. Thank you very much, and I wish you well. And from here, I advise you You go to whichever offices you came from, write your letters of resignation as members of parliament, and deliver them to the office of the Speaker. I wish you well. Wandai can now hand over to Junet without much drama.
We've seen happening in Parliament, basically. Now that Opio and I has been approved as Cabinet Secretary nominee to be appointed by the President, he's bid the House goodbye. And the Speaker has announced who the new minority leader in the National Assembly is going to be. So the House has basically got to now take a decision on Stella Langat.
Right.
The Committee on Appointment basically said that Stella Langat is not suitable to be picked. We had this conversation again on Monday. And on Monday, what we were asking is for the people to tell us how they felt these nominees, all of them behaved, how they felt the process was conducted, whether it was conducted well or not. And we got an overwhelming kind of response from the people who are online, saying many of them were saying they were not happy with the process. Many of them were saying they were not happy with several candidates and how they performed. Some of them were saying they were happy with several candidates on how they performed. Stella Langat herself, the one who's now been rejected, she had been nominated to be the Cabinet Secretary for Gender. Okay. How did she perform in her vetting that has led now to this committee saying no to her? This conversation is coming to you, and we've got several panelists who will be joining us for the conversation. Davis Malombe, the Executive Director of the Kenya Human Rights Commission, the Transparency International Kenya Executive Director Sheila Masinde, and Kawiva Wambua, Deputy Executive Director at Inuka Misisi. We want to hear from them. So this is what we are seeing in Parliament. What's their reaction to it, and what next?
Right.
So what is it that happens next? And then we want to hear from the public. Now that we've seen this exercise coming up to this point in Parliament, so what is it that we feel going forward? Is there confidence in this team? If there's no confidence in the team, then what does that mean, right, going forward? Maybe we just quickly play the clip of how Stella Langat performed during her vetting, and then we pick up the conversation from there, right? Yeah, let's start with that.
Okay.
Intervening in the debate to allow the majority leader lay some papers and give motion.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker, and sorry for the interruption. Honorable Speaker, I beg to lay the following paper on the table of the House today, Wednesday, 7th August 2024.
No, not that one. So I think we'll come back
The
to that
second
one.
report of the
We want,
Committee on Appointments on the vetting of persons for appointment to the offices of...
So what we'll be playing, and I think now we're live, what we'll be playing is later a clip of how Stella Langat performed. But let's get into the conversation, right? What we're hearing. Okay, I'll switch on my. Okay, so.
So perhaps there are pointers as to why
Mm.
the vetting committee decided, or rather, to reject this particular nomination.
Yeah.
And pointers as to why this one was rejected and why others were not.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, would appear as though, you know, certain things were happening in the room at the time that she was a bit unaware of. And then really, how prepared was she to even answer the questions, or on a broader scale, how prepared is she to be able to take on the duties, roles, and responsibilities of a cabinet secretary in this particular docket? It is a wide one. It's not just gender. It has other things attached to it as well, culture, heritage, and etc., etc. So the question is then, would she then be able to handle all of this based on the responses that she's given? And this is the thing about an interview, isn't it? That you have to be able at that point to convince everybody who is in the room asking questions of you that you can actually do this thing, and in a manner in which is then satisfactory to those who are giving you the checks or the crosses. And in this case, she got more crosses than checks. The question is then, what happens after this rejection of her particular nomination? Is there an opportunity for her to save her skin? Is there an opportunity for the committee to go back and retreat and say, okay, can we look at this again? Will the House now say, actually, you know what, maybe not too bad. It was a case of, you know, nerves, or it was a case of a bad day, the right woman on the wrong day kind of thing. And so then to be able to ask questions in terms of what will happen if it's a no. Will the president have to come back and give another name? What will Parliament do?
And the thing is, just like a conversation has been happening across the country, and we had this conversation on Monday. There were many people felt that the right questions were not asked to these candidates. Many felt that they were not even responding to the questions that asked. And many were feeling that some candidates were not even appearing to understand what the job entails. Okay, so now let's pick up from our panelists, and the first one to come on is Kawiva Wambua, who's the Deputy Executive Director at Inuka Nisisi. And Kawiva, we want to start here by saying, look, we are seeing what's happening in Parliament. So 19 of those parliamentarians said yes. I think the vote is now going on there currently, and we'll be getting the updates as this happens on what they're saying about this particular candidate, Stella Langat. The committee recommended that Stella Langat not be approved. Does it matter whether she's approved or not, Kawiva Wambua?
Thank you very much, Eric and Ruto. My name, as you said, is Kawiva. I work with Inuka, and the question that we are discussing today is, we must remember, coming from the protests by Kenyans, the question of Kenyans telling Ruto, remove your cabinet. The question of Kenyans saying they are not performing. The question of Kenyans saying service delivery is the core business of government, and therefore we want to get people who perform. That is the basis of this discussion, and it came with the process. So when we had the other space, I talked a bit, and I said that the president, in bringing back the 10 former cabinet secretaries, in itself was, in my view, according to section 75(3) of the Constitution, unconstitutional. And I said also that the other new ones that had been brought, we needed to have more time in terms of public participants, so that we could be able to gauge whether or not their credentials, their experience, or even their specialization in terms of education. Because sometimes for young people, you may not have the requisite, what we may call long-term experience in public service for you to perform, but just the fact that you have got the relevant knowledge and skills to do that. Therefore, I think that the fact that the Committee of Parliament, and I am saying this with 10 pinches of salt, because it is very clear from the interviews, from the vetting, from the appearance before the committee, that we do not trust. I did not trust the process, because we saw the committee was kind of lenient. We saw the committee was kind of helping candidates get through it. So maybe even the fact that they dropped one name is just for purposes of show. They just want to demonstrate that we had objective, that at least we failed one person. And there is no particular grounds of clearly saying that Langat and by extension the other people either are going to perform or not. Remember, Parliament has vetted the 22 people who had been CSS, 22 or 21, who had been CSS and who had been fired by the president. And this is the same Parliament that is doing that. And going back to the Gen Z revolution, remember their first take was that Parliament has failed them because Parliament is not holding the executive to task; they are not oversighting them. So, in my view, that Lagarde has been failed could be just a demonstration of, the committee and Parliament to say that, we are meticulous. But in actual fact, they were not. So, I think legally, the president may not appoint somebody who has not been approved by Parliament. The president, on considering the report by Parliament in the appointments, may suggest another name or may bring back the same name for further discussion with Parliament. That is his prerogative. But like I said the other time, and I'll say now, this whole process is a charade. We are being taken for a ride. The fact of including people from ODM, the Orange Democratic Party, into the cabinet in itself is supposed only to serve to hoodwink. Or I think the president thought it was a political masterstroke that certain sections of Kenya, certain communities in Kenya will find that they're included in government, what is calling a broad-based government. And I think that is an abuse to the intelligence of Kenyans, because it does not in any way, the coming together of political parties does not in any way address the key issues that Kenyans wanted to be addressed. Thank you, Latif.
I ask you, based on what you've said, I mean, these are sentiments that you've put out previously, that this whole thing was a charade and, we are not sure. Then would it matter the kind of questions that were then being asked of these individuals? And if we see that is the case, why would they go ahead and reject one person from all of this, if indeed it didn't matter and it was just a window, or rather a laundry exercise? Why would it matter that they rejected someone from this list if they were not being, characteristic of one that was cleaning properly of this particular process? Why would it matter?
As a matter of fact, I hold the opinion, and many Kenyans will, if they look at the process carefully, will hold the opinion that Parliament does not have the requisite seriousness needed to handle this matter. Let me tell you, if Parliament is saying that they do not know, the committee is saying that they do not know whether this person is able to execute the function for which they have been nominated, that particular statement itself is wanting. Why? You have an opportunity to vet. You have an opportunity to ask the right questions. You have an opportunity to know, because the person has presented themselves before you. You have the opportunity to be able to interrogate this person to go through their records, to go through where they were working, even if they have not worked for a long time, to go through the academic qualification certificate, so that then you can establish a sense of knowledge or a sense of perspective on whether or not this particular person is able to do that job. Ceteris paribus, everything else constant. You know, this goes to the real question of unemployment or the young people in this country. If you see most job adverts, they talk about experience of this number of years. And you cannot get experience without going through a process of learning and exercising your skills and knowledge. So the reason what that parliament, the committee of parliament is giving is should not actually be something that they communicate to Kenyans, because it's a shame on their capability to do due diligence. Okay, so and that's why I said even they are saying that this person is not suitable, or in their opinion saying that they are not able to do that function. What is the basis? What is the basis that they say the other people who had been returned by the president to this particular list were capable when already Kenyans had said they are not capable?
Right.
What is the yardstick? You know, so it's inconsequential, basically.
Almost seeming as though you needed to have one person at the very least who didn't make it to make it seem as though you actually were, going through the process properly. Does it sound like that?
Sorry, I didn't hear.
Almost wanted to make it seem as though, let's make it show that we dropped one person at the very least, so that it would appear as though the process was, sanitized, that not everybody went through and we were asking the right questions and we didn't feel that this person met the mark. But what I hear you saying is that it didn't matter here or there, that the same character of questions is what was being asked, and that this is what we've come up with. Would it have made a difference if the right questions, according to what Kenyans are saying, were actually asked? Do you think that more people would have been dropped or rejected in terms of nomination?
Let me tell you, Duko and the members present here, that the functions for which these Kenyans have been nominated to do are serious national level functions. They are serious opportunities for them to provide services to Kenyans. So if Parliament had taken their time and asked the relevant questions, the questions that can give them answers, then they would have helped this country get the good people. But in my view, that they just dropped one name, that's basically almost to say, well, we are not a rubber stamp. We can even reject what the president said. It's a show. It's like a game. It's like they are taking us to a theater. If they had asked the correct questions, you cannot get a result when you have not invested in looking for that particular result. If you ask the wrong questions, you get the wrong answers. If you you display such incompetence like what we saw during what they called vetting, then obviously you are going to get different results. So this what they are treating us to. What they are treating us to is a charade, basically a posturing that, well, the president proposed this person, we rejected them. It is like what the president did. I removed them, but now I brought them. I listened to you, I removed them, but he brings them all back. It's a game. So I think what we need to do as Kenyans is to renegotiate the political space to say that we are not going to be taken for a charade. The parliament is vetting people. They should ask the correct questions. They should ask the questions that give the results for which they want. So any other results gotten through other methods or other questions like those ones that they asked, or other processes that look like what they did, are not valid, are not viable results. And therefore, I think Parliament has stood again as one of the greatest hindrances of the exercise of democratic governance in this country. Thank you.
The Kenya Human Rights Commission, Davis Malombe, and he's in on the space with us. Davis, Karibu. And even as we get into it, I'd like to get your insights in terms of what you've seen happening over the last few hours today. Parliament has gone ahead and said has given a tick to all but one of the cabinet nominees. From a rights perspective, where opinions of Kenyans had been put out there for a while in terms of who these cabinet nominees were, what are your thoughts in terms of moving forward when we say or think that Kenyans are still saying a big no? What recourse do they have? These cabinet nominees were. What are your thoughts in terms of moving forward when
mute that guy.
Thank you for those questions. I just want to start with a bit of background again, where Kawive started. We had a process where there was public protest, where the president ended up firing the cabinet. There was also a protest up to the point of
Is he on? Okay, we seem to have lost Malombe. Let's see whether we can get him back. But then here's the issue, though, that we're having a conversation about what's happened in Parliament and what is still ongoing, and I think the members are still now voting on whether to agree with the committee to reject the nomination of Stella Lagat. Meanwhile, as all that is happening, State House has already sent a communique that
participate in political, economic, and the social governance processes, and also accrue benefits out of that.
So we have an issue with the Davis's mic, so we just mute him and then get that sorted a bit. We see whether we can get it sorted and continue the conversation. State House says tomorrow 9 a.m. Those that have been approved by Parliament are going to be sworn in tomorrow afternoon. So tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. That tells you that this process is going on.
Yes, it is.
Okay. So should it matter what everybody else thinks?
I think it does matter what everybody else thinks. Should it matter? 100%. It should matter what everybody else thinks. Does it matter what everybody else thinks at this point? And I think that's where you get the answer no. That you can say whatever you want. You can take it to court. You can decide you're going to recall. Because I think one of the things that we'll be looking at through this conversation is that what are the points for recourse? What are the elements for recourse that Kenyans, being the primary stakeholder when it comes to governance in this country, have an opportunity to do? And I think that because you realize that should it matter, does it matter, are two totally different things here, that you have to get to the point whereby you say, okay, so what happens next? That it's going to go on business as usual. Parliament went ahead. The Committee on Appointments met. They vetted these individuals. All but one of them were given the sign of approval. Parliament is currently voting. So ask yourself what happens that regardless of the outcome of the parliamentary vote tonight, that an invitation has already been sent out about the swearing in of cabinet secretaries. What does that tell you? That regardless of what the outcome or that there is a known outcome.
Yeah.
There is already a known outcome.
No.
So regardless of your...
The other argument would be that the outcome, it's gone through the process. It's gone through the process. The Committee of Parliament has presented its report. Members of Parliament have voted. And once the vote is already clear, the next thing that State House knows is, well,
we're going to swear in these individuals.
Because the communication is going to come back from the Speaker of the National Assembly that so-and-so has been approved. So the ones that have been approved, well, can we go ahead and then conduct a swearing-in ceremony tomorrow, based on now, schedules of State House? Then if there's anybody else who needs to be sworn in much later, okay, we'll deal with them
We'll
later.
go ahead and deal with that. So here we are, and the thing is, a couple of days ago, when we're looking at the importance of public participation and said that those things were necessary to happen, how important or how critical is the voice of the people when it comes to decisions such as this? That there's going to be some noise on the periphery, but it doesn't matter what it is that you say. We are going to go ahead and do this because, the processes have taken place. Whether it met its mark in terms of it being procedural is a totally different conversation. But it's going to happen. Like we said, an invitation has already been sent out. A swearing-in ceremony is already being arranged as we speak, and it'll happen tomorrow morning. And by the end of the day, you will have a cabinet that will start work on Friday. Essentially, that's what we are saying. So whether you make all the noise and fluff your feathers that this is going to happen, that it is already a done deal, procedurally it happened, and people have made the decision, and we go ahead with it. So the question is that, have Kenyans seen this and said, all right, then it's okay? Does it matter?
Should it matter?
Should it matter? Yes, it should. Does it matter? Is a totally different question.
Okay.
And in this case, I think the answer is hitting us in the face.
The issue was also now being canvassed is the process. Was the question of integrity adequately addressed? Were issues of competence adequately addressed? Now that we have this members that new nominees have been approved by Parliament, but was the process okay? Sheila Masinde is the executive director at Transparency International Kenya, and she and Davies and Kawiva Wambua and others have been very, very big and vocal on the matter of transparency, on ensuring that Chapter 6 of the Constitution of Kenya is adhered to, in how we get people who serve in public office. Now, Sheila is on the line, and we want to hear from you, Sheila. You have the mic. Is it okay? Was the process okay? Then what next if it wasn't okay? And if it was, then also what next? Yes, go ahead.
The public was invited to submit their, memoranda, signed affidavits on the suitability of the nominees of the cabinet secretaries. So to start with, the period of public participation was just not sufficient. I think Kenyans had just about a week, and you notice that the deadline for submissions was on the 31st of July, with vetting having started, is it on the 1st or 2nd? But it was basically just 12 hours in between the deadline of submission and the start of the vetting. And hence the question, what time did the committee have to just review, synthesize all these memoranda that were submitted, and even just give those nominees an opportunity to be able to respond? I think in the previous vetting process, because we did participate, we did submit affidavits, they seem to be a bit more, those are not as sufficient, but at least we could hear the members of Parliament in the Public Appointments Committee making reference to some of the submissions that had been made, and asking the nominees to respond directly to some of those questions, a number of them which were touching on issues around past conduct, integrity, which was really, really important. But this time, I think the Speaker made the communication that they've been given the submissions and they're going to respond in writing. I've not managed to look through that whole 258-page report just because it came out. We only received it this evening. I've only looked through just a quarter of it, and I can see some snippets of mentions of this person submitted this affidavit, it was dismissed because of this, but I still think because the Public Appointments Parliamentary Approval Act under Section 8 actually allows the committee, gives the committee 28 days from the date on which the notification of the nomination is given to conduct that process, meaning that in this instance, because these nominations were made actually less than 2 weeks ago. If I'm to be very specific, maybe is it just 12 days ago? And within 12 days, we have finished that process, yet we have 28 days. Of course, there's a pressure of filling these positions, but we must follow the law. The law allows us to participate as members of the public and ensure that our views are heard. But in this case, the sense I feel is that the submissions were not adequately, taken in regard to suitability, and this in a country where courts have already ruled that public participation is a principle. And it's not a good thing, or that thing that you just give people when you feel like it. It's a given in the Constitution, so it shouldn't have been a cosmetic exercise. And even this was recently reinforced in the Schiff case, where the court outlined the bare minimum requirements for public participation. And one of that is that give the public sufficient time to be able to participate. I think still in regard to the process, even as we look forward to how do we then reform this vetting process so that it is meaningful. It is not just something that's cosmetic, you're just doing it because the Constitution or the law says it and we're just going to tick a box no matter what the public says. It really is because as we go back to Article 1 of the Constitution, all sovereign power belongs to the people of Kenya. And so we really need to ensure that we actually then follow the law. So my other point in terms of the process, which I think is really, really important to also take in as we move forward in future vetting processes, because this happened in the 2022 exercise as well, is basically the Parliamentary Committee of Appointments and also the National Assembly made a big mockery of the constitutional provisions on leadership and integrity, because they disregarded, some of the key concerns that were raised on the suitability of some of the nominees in line with the ethical and integrity standards that were set in the Constitution. One of the nominees has been under investigation by EACC. He was awaiting charges, of course, which had been stopped in court. But suddenly, a decision to charge by the Office of the Director of Public Prosecution was withdrawn, and there was no interrogation on this process at all by Parliament. Why were this decision to charge decisions made just just a few days to the vetting exercise? And yet, EACC had already written its note to Parliament saying that, hey, this guy is actually under investigation and we do not recommend him, for appointment. And I think then why do we have an entity like EACC? Why do we have Chapter 6? If you're not going to take that recommendation from the institution that is mandated to oversight issues around leadership and integrity, why do we pay money as taxpayers to this and this is and they are not allowed to, actually exercise their mandate. So Parliament once again made a mockery, because these are very critical positions, and yet we're not interrogating the previous conduct of people who are going to oversee billions of shillings in a country where every single cent counts. So, and then the other last point I think, which is really, really important, is on the wealth declarations. It almost feels like a fashion show. I come, I say how much I'm worth, my net worth is this. Last time it was this amount, this year it's this amount, but you don't interrogate, because hey, these are people who are doing business as a part-time, because we expect that as cabinet secretaries, in that state office, they're supposed to be serving full-time, but you don't interrogate how in under 2 years, someone who is running a part-time business, when every other business in Kenya is caving under, a very, very poor performing economy, and people are shutting down businesses, people seem to be doing fairly well in their part-time businesses. So there's no interrogation about that. I didn't hear much debate about it. And I think the thing that we really need to see is that even as cabinet nominees are required to declare their net worth during the vetting process, beyond these declarations that are made to the vetting committee, it is crucial that they then make, formal declarations in line with the Public Officers Ethics Act, which requires an individual to make an initial declaration within 30 days of joining the public service. So yes, of course, I don't know whether, like EACC, for instance, should have told us, if the previous cabinet secretaries, ones who have been, who are already serving and had been dismissed and now are reappointed, whether they have been making their wealth declarations, what are the declarations made? Have they verified the declarations that have been made? Have they been paying taxes? What do their annual returns and so on. And now for the new cabinet secretaries, perhaps that's why we need probably a longer period. When you say 28 days, there's a reason why possibly the law said we need 28 days for the vetting process, so that perhaps even some of these vetting institutions are able to check some of this information, so that by the time they come to Parliament, it is not just hearsay or someone just scratching his or her head and saying, yeah, I'm worth 1 billion shillings, but it should come from EACC. Yes, we filed with EACC or we filed with this relevant institution, and that has been verified that they have this is their income, this is a record of their income, assets, liabilities, and it has been legitimately earned. I think we need to push for possibly reforms within our wealth declaration system, such that this information it just doesn't become that figure that sends everyone on wild thoughts on how did you actually make this money. So, but moving forward, what we then expect is that, especially even for the previously serving cabinet secretaries, because now they have been appointed afresh, they are starting new terms. Yeah, so there are new terms and conditions. What we then expect is that for all of them, that within the next 30 days, as required by the law, they will then routinely file, declarations. They will file their declarations, and this will then be verified. And this then declarations should be very well verified, so that we check against any issues again in regard to underreporting or over-reporting of any assets or liabilities and income, and so that the EACC is able to flag any cases of illicit accumulation of wealth. And I think it's also important, because these networks were already declared publicly, that this information is then shared back to the public. But this is very, very urgent, and I think this time we will, as I think civil society, need to really follow this up as we push further for reforms into our wealth declaration system. But all this really tell us that we need to really review the current policy and legislative framework for wealth declaration, ensuring that they are made accessible to the public, so that citizens, civic groups, media, everyone is able to just check this information, raise any red flags regarding the wealth and lifestyle of public officers, because this has come as such a big issue in the last year, due to the just unashamed opulence that we have seen being displayed by public officers. And the question then is, how are you actually earning this money? Because that's definitely not where salaries that you're earning from the public service. So I think for me, those are the reforms we need forward in terms of the issues around public participation. What do we do in regard to the questions around leadership and integrity and the wealth declaration issues?
I mean, I think, Sheila, even as we mull over some of those issues, and I think that they've been issues that have been in the limelight for some time, and even as those questions are being asked, or that there is some kind of pressure that's being put on the agencies whose responsibility it is to make sure that everything is really cut according to the lines, is it time, do you think, for us to say, okay, well, let these individuals who've been chosen buckle down and actually do the job without the monkey on their shoulders of some of these questions that we asked? Or is it necessary that these are constant reminders as elements of good governance that must be spoken about at every opportunity?
I mean, we need to. These are things that are in our laws. They're not principles or values that are in our imagination. They're actually things that are written down in our laws. On leadership and integrity, Chapter 6 of the Constitution, Article 10 of the Constitution, we have a leadership and integrity law. We have various anti-corruption laws, Public Officers Ethics Act, all these things. Why aren't we just implementing these laws in regard to governing or oversighting, how public officers actually conduct themselves? But even on important aspects around vetting, these are aspects that are well laid down in the law. So it's just simply that we must demand that things are done as required by the law. And that's why I said that I think for us, there are lessons in terms of what can be done better in regard to the vetting process, because And it's not just in this last, not just 2022 or this last, what we've seen in the last 5 days, but even previously since the new constitution, we really haven't tested this constitution in regard to some of the very rich provisions it has in regard to integrity and public, what should be required of public officers. But you see, that's why this issue around, the vetting is so critical, because if you vet people and you don't do it in the right way, that means that you're then getting people in public service who are not deserving. Yet you have a constitution which really, really clarifies what elements or what values, what values are expected of someone who is in public office, because it is a public trust. It's something that is given to you by the public. So there are certain elements that must be checked, because before you occupy that public office, remember that the person occupying that office is supposed to, demonstrate, of course, respect, but also bring honor to that office. How do you bring honor to that office if in the first place you have issues before you even step into that office? And that's why the vetting process is so critical. And it's unfortunate that Parliament continues to make a joke of it. And I mean, I listened to some of the debates this afternoon and this evening from the feedback from the members of Parliament, and most of them are saying, "Oh, we are thankful. Oh, this time we have an appointment and someone appointed from my region." And so it seems like you're basically looking at it not from the character or from the qualifications or the competence or professionalism that this person espouses, but the first thing that you're looking at is, which region are they from? Which political party are they affiliated to? But then I guess that's what we should have expected because of the coming together of the two big political parties in the country.
Yeah.
I don't know that to call it a come with day or a merger or whatever, or a coalition or whatever it is. It's still not clear. But then I think that has really diluted the process. If you go back to the debate, most members of Parliament were looking at it from that aspect. You really didn't hear much about the issues around competence and as I go back to my pet topic, integrity and past conduct, which is what we really need to hear to give Kenyans confidence that you're putting the right people in public office.
All right. The other speaker here is Davis Malombe, Executive Director of Kenya Human Rights Commission. And we hope that now, this time, Davis, you can hear us clearly. Also, everybody who's joined in, thank you for staying on. We understand that we had a couple of technical issues earlier. There was an echo in the sound. If there's no echo now, please just give us a thumbs up so we can see that it's okay. If you're hearing us and there's no echo, just give us a thumbs up as Davis Malombe comes. Davis, we've heard from Sheila, we've heard from Kawive, and we've heard, what their contribution here has been so far. And there's still the big issue here, whether it's time that we accept this, we move. Sheila is saying there still need to be a lot of work that's done to make sure that we streamline the vetting process. How do we make the vetting process better streamlined? Do we sponsor a bill to go to Parliament to amend the existing bills? Do we sponsor a new bill to go to Parliament? Do we go to court so that then we can have some case law coming in? How do we do that, Davis? Davis, can you hear us? So, Davis, we still can't hear you. Okay, we still can't hear Davis, but we've seen a couple of thumbs up to show that the signal is now clear. What we want to do as well tonight is open up the session so that we can hear from you as you've logged in here, and we hear you telling us what you think about this. Parliament has made its decision. It's required to do that by law. The question is whether it did it the right way, whether we feel satisfied with the way it conducted this exercise, tomorrow, those cabinet secretary nominees are going to be sworn in. They'll become cabinet secretaries again. What happens going forward? What's the reaction of this? What do you feel about the entire process and what has happened? We're going to hear from a couple of people who have requested to speak. I want to start with the first one, Rachel. Rachel Shira, you have the mic. Let's hear from you. Rachel dropped. Okay, Rachel dropped.
Maybe Latif,
Yes, Kawive.
in response to the question that you are asking Davis Malombe, maybe the thing to say, and I will be very brief on this, is that in this country, we do not lack laws. We are not in shortage of laws or provisions that need to be adhered to so that we get what we want as a country. The Constitution, first and foremost, spells very clearly spells them very clearly with respect to what is required of the president. Remember, what Kenyans are saying to the president is, please implement the Constitution. And it's me who has said the police, that's your duty, implement the Constitution. It is not that Parliament lacks the requisite frameworks and legal instruments to vet properly. No, these instruments are there. Maybe the only question that we need to look at is, why are they not doing it? They're not doing it because in the opinion of parliamentarians, the opinion of the president, and that's why the president the other day was saying enough is enough. It is like they are our lords. So we are their servants. We are who are we? Who is Eric Latif? He can have his space, say what he wants, but he will do what he will do anyway because we have the power, we were elected, not knowing that their positions, this power that they are exercising is donated. And that one of the constitution is very clear. They exercise that power because it is donated to them by Kenyans. But they have gone there and become kings, become lords. And therefore, whether you have a petition, like Sheila said, there are petitions that we send to Parliament and Kenyans have written about it. But Parliament says, well, you have written this, but it is not, it has no bearing. We can do what we want. It is basically the ethic of leadership in this country, that actually we are getting leaders who, once they get into office, are so full of power, are so full of a sense of self-fulfillment that they forget the servant role that they are supposed to play in leadership. It's a question of attitude. It's a question of culture. It's a question of ethical considerations in terms of leadership. It is not laws that we lack. Going to the court, yes, we can go. But you saw the other day, the judiciary was praying. Praying for what? For peace, so that they can be able to do their work. I mean, honestly, and this thing of using religious theology sort of to cover everything, so as to pray away everything. I think we must be aware of the fact that these are instruments that people who get into power use so as to make sure that you are subservient, you are quiet, you are good, you are not making noise, you are treating them like our lords. And that is what Kenyans have said must stop. We have laws, they must be followed, and if you are not following them, they should. In fact, I will not be surprised if Kenyans petitioned, for example, to have Parliament disbanded because they're not doing what they're supposed to do. They can't check the president. They can't follow the law. They are doing what they want. And the question is like, what will you do? The other day, the president said there are institutions that do this work, but these institutions are created by Kenyans, by the Kenyan constitution, to do work for Kenyans, not for themselves. I think that is the problem. The question of a culture of impunity that has pervaded the political leadership space.
So again, the question, I want to come back to that question. So we have seen that they have not followed in what we feel, they have not followed that due process. For example, the issue of ethics, if you have a case in court or if you're under investigation, or the issue of wealth declaration. So if somebody has come and said that this is my wealth, and Sheila said maybe we need to have a step-by-step check. If this is the wealth, the ESCC should check is what you've declared as the sources of your wealth. Do they make sense? If what you have said here, does it correspond with all the other records that the Kenya Revenue Authority have the same records? Does the ESCC have the same record? So is this process clear to the members of parliament? That I'm still lost at that, because we are saying, yeah. I mean, how could you not ask? How can we challenge that? Are we going to challenge it by saying this is the section of the law, let's go to court and say you do not follow this section of the law? Or are we going to challenge it by saying that actually from what we've seen from the laid out laws and procedures, there are some gaps that need to be filled? That's the question that I'm asking. Let's try again. Davis Malombe. Third time lucky, hopefully. Davis?
Okay. Hello?
Yes, we can go on. We can now hear you.
Okay. Thank you. These are my perspectives. I think from where we sit, it is very clear that this process was compromised, and therefore it's the people to fair justice and also the right to public participation. And I just want to explain using the following examples. When advertisements were put in place to submit their applications, 837 Kenyans submitted their random. Out of the 837, 66 were disqualified on taking what they were saying. They were not written stated on oath, which means it's only 181 people who complied. And this kind of approach is basically unnecessary given the and also public interest in this matter, and it can therefore be challenged on the basis of Article 7 on unfair administrative action. Number two, if you read from the parliamentary committee in that report, what they are approving the 20 nominees who they were vetting, it says the following nominees demonstrated knowledge of topical, administrative, and technical issues on their portfolios. And then when you go to section 2.10, they say they looked at the constitutional, one of which is at 130 on representation of regional and ethnic balance, leadership and integrity, and also 200 and Article 27. So in their conclusion, it's very clear they mainly focus on technical and the topical administrative aspects of the vetting process, but they failed to look on the integrity, actually, which is the first provision of Article 73. It talks about integrity and competence and expertise. And the threshold for this process is also in the spirit of the Constitution, which talks about a conduct which is not going to bring honor and respect to the nation and the office. And we have seen many cases where most of these candidates who had been nominated have so many moral and ethical issues. So the spirit of the Constitution is not basically about the technical, but also on the moral and ethical threshold. If you look at the questions which were also raised by Kenyans, if you look at the questions which were also raised by Kenyans in the vetting process, some of them actually challenged the process based on the fact that the appointments were not also in line with the regional and ethnic balance. And the committee did not look at this. And if you look at those people critically, 5 out of 21 comes from one community. So the committee also had a leeway to reject the list based on that basis. People are also concerned by the fact that 11 out of the nominees were people who are rejected by the president based on the reasons which he gave. Actually, the reasons were competence and performance. So that alone shows that 11 out of 21 should not even have been allowed in the list, and the parliament should have challenged that ab initio. Kenyans also raised concerns about the economic and financial prudence of some of this process, they were asking, given the economic, why would you appoint 21 and you have a leeway to even appoint between 14 and 17? Why are you going to force the country into elections of the two persons from the ODM when the country is also strongly financially? So all those factors, which are actually in line with the constitution, were not considered. And therefore, it's very clear that the committee was just hell-bound to approve this process and also the outcome without also looking at the critical questions, which are also in line with the constitution. So from where we sit, we are very clear that there's an opportunity to challenge the process and outcome based on the constitution in court. And I remember in one of the days when the vetting was happening, the speaker also talked about appending public participation policy in the Senate. So that's also part of what we should be pushing for. But OPING is going to be informed by the decisions which have also emerged from the court. So I think the whole process, therefore, did not just violate the constitution, but also fundamental rights and freedoms, also on the right to participation, on the right to self-determination, and also on the right to fair administrative action. So I think we have a clear basis for which we can go to court and also challenge the outcome of this process. And we think this will also set very good precedents when it comes to not just vetting, but also respecting the will of people when it comes to the governance of public affairs.
Well, thank you very much, Davis. That was a good one. And let's now hear from everybody else who's joined in. Request for a mic. We'll give you the mic to speak. Let's hear your reaction to this new appointment. The President, State House has already sent an alert that tomorrow morning at 9 a.m., those that have been approved by Parliament this afternoon will be sworn in so that they can begin work immediately. What do you think? Do you think the process was okay? Do you think there's some who are okay? Do you think it's time now we said, all right, so they are going to be sworn in, and this is what we are going to do as citizens going forward, lighting a fire under their feet constantly? Okay, the first mic, Shi Wanjiro Njeru.
Eric, hi guys, can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Go ahead.
Yes, we can. Go ahead. Thanks. Eric, tonight I don't have a lot of answers, but I have a lot of questions. When the president read the press release which announced the cabinet that has just been vetted, it literally felt like someone had punched my stomach and, punched the wind out of me. So being speechless is
She, there's an issue.
Eric. There's an issue. Sorry?
There's an issue. We are breaking. We can't hear you.
We are breaking. We can't hear you.
And there's an echo on your side now.
Okay. Sorry. There's an echo. I don't know what to do about that. Can you hear me now?
We can hear you.
We can hear you. Okay, so I don't know where I lost you, so I'll start from the beginning. I'm saying this whole process of this new cabinet has been quite shocking for me, to be honest, to the point where I have had very little words. Because I thought the people, the Kenyans had come out very clearly for the first time in a very long time to articulate precisely what they expected to see in terms of leadership and governance vis-a-vis our constitution and respect and regard for constitutionalism and the rule of law. And then the only thing we have seen has been political games. It's theater. It's like we are watching a play. So I don't know what to say, really, Eric. And that's why I'm saying I'm full of questions. I have more questions than I do have anything, an opinion, because I've listened to the presenter from Kenya Human Rights Commission, and I agree, there's always recourse through the judicial system. But we have a government that doesn't care about court orders. I don't know. I mean, we have seen how the police and the, security forces have continued to conduct themselves. We have seen, people have asked questions. The media have screamed themselves hoarse about the conduct of how, you know, the last 2 months have unfolded, absolutely nobody, you know, is paying any attention. So I don't know
So
even how to contribute. Yes.
you're saying you have many questions.
You're
Just
saying you
ask
have
one.
many questions. Yes. What are Kenyans to do now? Because court orders are not obeyed. So even if we go and the court rules in favor of whatever the petition will be for hopefully the people, it will not be obeyed. So we are going to have a cabinet in place on Friday, as somebody said earlier, which has absolutely no public legitimacy. Alafu tutadu. I don't know.
Okay.
That's pretty much my question. Yes, thanks.
Thank you, Shiri. Richard, you have the mic.
Thank you, Latif and Ndu for hosting. Can you please confirm you can hear me?
Go ahead.
Yes, we can hear you.
All right, thank you. So it's really good to get to have a reaction to what is happening, specifically what happened to Parliament today. I think Kenya is just a stage, and it's full of suckers, and what you're always treated to is as quoting the constitution, what the expectation is, and then you'd imagine that the House would be putting itself up to the standards we've defined in our constitution, but that has never been the case for the longest time. So looking at how the process of vetting happened and how cabinet secretaries were rinsed to, sort of now go into government, tomorrow to have the president go ahead and appoint them is actually the biggest joke, because the protest that led to the movement making the demands that we need to have accountability, we need to have competence in public service, and what we've been treated to right now, it actually shows the extent to which politicians hold us. I'm sorry, I think I'm hearing an echo. I don't know if you guys can hear that.
We can hear you.
No, all right. So I think just looking at how politicians rate Kenyans' IQ is actually stunning. They would come to rallies and tell us, we're intelligent, but the decisions they make each and every single day, remind us of how foolish we are. So I think looking at the process that happened with vetting, there is no seriousness. Of course, the president has got the mandate to go ahead and nominate people. I mean, there is no specific criteria, but with the cries we've been having about accountability right now, the guys have argued that let's look at the academic credentials. And if you actually check across the world, check an example of Britain. I mean, do they take people who are academically qualified to go into slots of positions, especially in ministries? Probably not. But their politics, in a way, works. You have Labour and you have the Tories, and they have clear defined policies. So people who come on there get to serve that. We do not have the advantage of politics working in Kenya. So again, we'd have to resort to, experts. But again, the question I'd ask is the experts we have, PSs, perhaps that's a different conversation we'd had on a different day. But again, to my final point, cabinet secretaries are the liaison between the executive to the experts you have in the ministry. So these people should have leadership skills. They should actually be able to have the heart of the country and connect with the people. They should be able to serve and not, have regional kingpins who would even go ahead and serve regional interests. So again, what have we been treated to? I mean, we are trying to quote the constitution, yes. We are trying to look at it from a very professional point of view. But what William Ruto did essentially is play politics. And we are trying to judge the nominations he made based on competence, which is actually not a standard in the very first place. So I don't know how this is going to play out, to be very honest, because for a government that came into power and was so religious, we are still in the book of Lamentations. For how long would Kenyans cry for accountability and never see it come to pass? So, yeah, people like Mbadi who came and were, oozing wisdom, so they say. I mean, I'm sorry for him, because it seems the botanist we have at State House, is the one who's actually leading in economics. And I doubt if most of these guys would even have a chance to be able to, present ideas that the president and cabinet would actually adopt. So for me, I still believe the president is the biggest problem, as Ahmed Nasser one morning made in a studio and said, the problem is the president here. And he doesn't listen, in my view, and that's a personal view. He does not have a clear vision of what he wants. He's the know-it-all, the man in the room. So the cabinet secretaries can go have tea in status and can go fill the numbers and do the press they do in the morning. I don't see anything much coming out of it, to be very honest. We'll still end up in the same state that we are in. Thank you, and Eric.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Somebody else who's online, Karanja Matindi, let's hear from you. The price of freedom is eternal vigilance. That's his mantra. Karanja.
Good evening, everybody. I hope you can hear me.
Yes, we can.
Good evening.
And thank you, Eric, for giving me the chance to speak. And thank you, fellow Kenyans who believe that we deserve better. It is disappointing that the National Assembly approved the 19 nominees. I believe they rejected Miss Lagat, if I'm not mistaken. But it is not surprising because, as has already been echoed, we are dealing with constitutional outlaws. We are dealing with a regime that has effectively overthrown the Constitution of Kenya, and it is for us Kenyans to decide what we do next. I am encouraged that we have high hopes. We have high hopes for our country, and we are willing to put the work in the various ways that we can. I had a quick look at the report. It did say that nearly 1,000 people submitted their views, but unfortunately, because of the way the statute is structured, those statements have got to be on oath. So if they said something that was not on oath, that was disregarded. There is a view that that provision itself is unconstitutional, not least because we know there are instances where people are being vetted or people are being invited to submit statements and they're not required to do that on oath. But that is it's a separate issue that can be addressed separately. In terms of the immediate action, in as much as it is natural for us to feel disappointed, we must not lose hope. We must not lose hope, not least because we've come a long way since 2010 and the new constitution. And the constitution has proven itself to be resilient. It has proven itself to be responsive to people's concerns as long as it is moved properly. We move it properly through our political actions. We move it properly by taking part, for example, in those submissions and complying with the requirements of the law. I believe there were about 187 statements that were valid.
Yes.
So we have put it on record. So it is a matter of record that Kenyans reject the nominees and the appointees and the approvers, and nobody can take that from us. We continue to object. We continue to take action. We will continue to take action. It is our right and our responsibility as Kenyans to do everything we can within the law, within the constitution, to make sure that we are heard. I am reminded of, I think there's a famous saying about a hyena coming to a rock and telling the rock or passing a message to the rock. And the hyena saying, even if you pretend not to hear me, I have passed the message. We may be in a similar position. Thankfully, we are not hyenas. And we shall continue saying loudly and clearly to the powers that be that they have to either obey the constitution or they leave office. I know, for example, I believe it is the spokesperson from the Kenya Human Rights Commission who was talking about possible legal action. That is an option. for those who are able to take legal action, I'm pretty sure they will take legal action. But even those who are not able to take legal action, there is no limit to the political action that we can take individually and collectively within the Constitution to remind these people that they are illegitimate. They are in power merely because they happen to have the instruments of power which they are abusing. We have shamefully people standing up in the National Assembly and lying that the former AG resigned. That is a shameful statement because the head of state said they rescinded the appointment. And it is my hope that we will put this nonsense behind us, and those kind of people should be put in social jail. We should be turning our backs when we see them. They do not deserve our attention. They do not deserve our company. They do not deserve anything that is decent because they have proven themselves to be indecent people. They have proven themselves to be unprincipled, and they have proven that they only care about themselves. You know, it is laughable that National Assembly can say, because so-and-so turned up in a normal suit, we don't expect them to be flamboyant in the future. That is stupidity of the highest regard, and we should regard it as stupidity. We are 50 odd million people, and it cannot be said that we do not see through that nonsense. I am sure, as you can probably detect, I am rather picked because of what's happening. But I think we should be angry because we are being shown material of the highest order. We should be angry, and we deserve better. We know that we have capable people who can stand up for the Constitution and the people of Kenya. It is just that we still continue to have a colonial state which believes that they rule rather than serve us. Thankfully, we have a foundation, a very good foundation, which is the Constitution of Kenya.
Yeah.
And it is a struggle that we have, which we shall continue in our different ways. And it is my belief that we shall triumph, and we will have a country that serves all of us, that makes us proud, wherever we may be, because it is a country and a state that responds to the needs of its citizens and its people.
Thank you, Karanja.
So I would encourage that we continue in our different ways, opposing, giving our views, and doing everything which is lawful, which is within our powers to bring change. Thank you.
Asante sana. Thank you, Karanja. There also comments.
Yeah.
People who are, you can also share your views on the comment section so everybody else can also see them.
Indeed. The Constitution of Kenya is valid to the members of parliament only when they want to better their interests, but irrelevant when it comes to doing what is right for the nation. We need a dictatorial constitution that cuts across all classes, says KD. Jelly says, the gap in a lot of our laws is the consideration of how they will be implemented. We issued a lot of aspirational laws with no roadmap on how they will be breathed life. Is the gap we need to plug in the gap? We need to plug the insistence of a roadmap for all existing laws, including CS vetting. Parliamentary vetting, says Kalmari, should be abolished. Same as our county assemblies. They only rubber stamp what the president and governors have nominated, besides extorting money from nominees. They also sit and earn allowances and do nothing. Okay, so it goes on. Wabala says, why the haste to vet, approve, and to swear in the CSs? We have CSs in under 2 weeks, as though we're in a constitutional moment without them. Where is the place of public participation in Kenya? IEBC should be constituted with this kind of speed. So I guess the question is, that's one of the big questions that comes in. Why was there a hurry? Why was there a need to do that? Well, you need to have government running. That's one for sure. You can't have a lacuna whereby you're wondering, okay, so across board, what happens and who sits in the place? Then others would argue, well, you have an engine in permanent secretaries who run ministries anyway, so why not allow them go on for some time?
More comments? Should we hear from Salima?
Let's hear from Salima.
Salima Masharia, you have the mic.
Thank you so much, and thank you for the speakers who've spoken before me. I think for me, I just want to look at this issue from a psychological angle, and I'm really concerned. Even before the mothers, the victims, families are still trying to come to terms with the loss of their children, of their loved ones. Bodies are still lying in morgues, family are yet to be compensated. And then boom, tomorrow we are being sworn in cabinet ministers who, when they were being vetted, they spoke highly of how much they're worth. And the question here then is what happens to people's pain, to people's anger, to people's who've been bruised through and through. And for me is who will they lead? Because now we are quiet. The country is quiet, not that because it's happy, but because they're bottling in anger and emotions, and we don't know how those feelings and emotions shall come into being. So for me, even is more concern to those leaders who are being sworn in on people's blood and sweat, and hence what will happen to the psychological wounds, because in a nutshell ni kama wametufunga elastoplast na kidonda haijapona, so inazidi kutokota kwa ndani. So I'm really concerned even who and how they'll address us, the nation, and going forward, what will happen. Yes, I know there are legal procedures into how then we can, and I think Malombe spoke about this, but what happens to people's well-being, to their lives, to their livelihoods, to relationships, because they've been bruised, to people still looking, searching for their family members who went, who were taken even from them or who died, and they still don't know. And then how do we reconcile as a nation the fact that there are people in this country who are worth 2-point-something billion, and we have families who can't afford a meal a day? So is it a question of resilience, of perseverance? So for me, is also, let's also look at the psychological impact this can have on us and our well-being as a country. I submit. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Salima. Let's hear from Molly. You have the mic, Molly.
Thank you. And I just want to say there's an echo every now and then. So if it's too much, I'll let you guys know by waving.
Okay.
Thank you for giving me the mic. And actually, contrary to what a lot of people have said about being disappointed, I'm one of those that's not disappointed at all. I am not disappointed. To be disappointed, you would have to have expectations. And personally, I didn't have any, completely none. I lost expectations in this government like years ago. And sometimes I find it very amusing looking at how they run things. So I didn't have expectations, and therefore I wasn't disappointed, because I don't want to live like with a lot of hurt. But I'll talk about what I feel about the whole process. There's just what I think is happening right now with Ruto. This is my opinion. He's basically telling all Kenyans, F you, and forgive my language. That's what he's telling you. And if you can't still read what he's telling you, that's just it. Because let's say for the vetting process, I'm one of those that couldn't sit through a lot of them. I just watched a few of them for fun, to laugh, because that's where I am at. And then I attended your meeting yesterday, and there was someone saying, oh, Mbadi is so eloquent. It's only him being eloquent. Oh, if I can speak, therefore I can be president. Okay, then I need to learn how to speak eloquently. Maybe Kenyans will vote for me, you know? Eloquency, that's the bare minimum for coming to an interview, for heaven's sake. Come over and be able to speak and tell me what you do. That doesn't mean I'll hire you. Eloquence has nothing to do with this, so that's all BS. The other one that shocked me was that the health one. Like, I don't even want to know her name. Nowadays, I don't even know their faces or names. I see them once in a while. The health one that could not even tell, when she was asked about what's the patient ratio, anyone in healthcare knows such a basic question. She didn't even know what that meant. Or the IT one that didn't even know like e-citizen was someone's personal business. Well, we're sending all this important information, our personal information. She didn't even know Wetangula, that Wetangula guy was just helping her. And then they just clap hands and they laugh at us. We sit there, they laugh at us. And one thing I'm sure, and the other one that came over and was saying stuff about, he didn't even know what opulence is. When the other time he was talking about his 50,000 Kenya shillings belts and stuff. I am more than sure these guys, and guys is the best name I could use right now because I do use swear words. That guy, I'm sure they all sit down and they decide, what are we going to tell Kenyans? Oh, I'm going to tell Kenyans that I don't even know what opulence is. They come up with this BS together and they throw it at us. And then we sit and we get angry, we get hyper, like our blood pressure goes up and stuff. That's why I decided to not even have any expectations in them. What did I expect? For me, a vetting process, and this is something I looked up and I couldn't come up with it. So if someone knows, they could tell me. How long should a vetting process go for? I know people like to give examples, let's say with the UK and the US. If you look at their system, there's a time vetting process took 98 days for one, 97 days, 12 days. So it's a range. It wasn't like a strict thing. And during that process, so when you tell me that you are worth, let's say that young boy that was 32 million or something and he's 32, when you tell me he's worth that, I want you to take time, go back. He's telling you he got this money from farming and digging and doing what. Go and find those farms. Look at the title deeds. How did they change hands? Look at his books. If you are a farmer, I've been a farmer. You have like stuff written down. Here's how many chicken I have. Here's when I sold them. Here's the eggs. Here's how I got to this 32 million. These guys that have 690 million, I want you to go and follow that money and follow their relatives. Check their relatives' bank accounts and tell me how. Just come to me and tell me they have 690. How did you make it? Oh, I made it this way, and that's it. So for me, that whole process was bullshit, and it was just something put down to laugh at Kenyans.
Thank you, Molly.
That's what I think about that.
Thank you, Molly.
Sorry.
More speakers on here, and I think let's now try and shift our focus to the what next.
Right.
Okay. So yeah, the vetting has happened. We were happy, we were not happy. So what next? So what should we do next? What should Kenyans do next? What should you and I do next? Now that it has happened this way. What do you want to do next? Do you want to make sure that you hold them accountable? Do you want to go and look at the laws and say these are where the gaps are? Do you want to go and look at the processes and see these are where the processes are? Do you want to join the Kenya Human Rights Commission and say, I'd like to be enjoined in a suit that goes to challenge this process in court? What next? What do you want to do? Let's hear from more speakers here. I'm going to give the mic now to Fortune Ochako. What next?
Hello, good evening.
Good evening.
Yes, my submissions now this evening, now that the vetting process has just been completed, and we expected much of some of the questions to be asked to be like some of comprehensive a bit, but the moment like it has just happened. Now for next, we expect them now to hold them accountable. As I was watching the parliament this evening, like now we encourage, we hold them accountable. Like they should now serve the Kenyans. We like people like, let's say people like Mbadi and the guy who has been nominated for the energy sector. These are people who have been. These are people who has been criticizing the government for so long. Now we expect them to serve the Kenyans the way they were putting like other ones from the previous years. And next, because it just happened in the vetting process, I think the problem has been on the issue of the person who drafted the vetting process, because there are some issues like how can you vet someone like just mentioning the wealth without even considering some things like tax avoidance, those people, like tax accountability, like the you can't come here and then you declare like my wealth is like 200 million without like, do you even file like do we have even the receipts from the KRA? Like we should like consider things like this in the coming future, like how, like if we want to vet someone, like we need to consider something like the tax receipts.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Fortune. Next mic goes to Jerotich.
Okay, good evening, everyone. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Excellent. Thank you. Thank you for this and the space yesterday. I just have a few things I'd like to reflect on. I think as we are having this conversation, like so many of you who think this was a setup and it's a waste of our time, I want to just underscore that it was a setup and an absolute waste of our time. I agree with Karanja Matindi when he said that the Constitution of Kenya is resilient, but so is impunity and criminality. And right now, this is a battle between the resilience of and the implementation of the Constitution and the race to loot and plunder this country to its absolute deathbed. And this is all part of the attempt to maintain power. You know, this is a game that the regime intends to win. And the question to us right now is, are we going to let this regime win? I start off with the position that Parliament is the problem. Parliament has always been the problem. And in fact, when you consider the fact that the president dismissed his cabinet rather than dissolve the parliament, you can understand now why he needed an absolutely captured house. And this captured house is one that will do his bidding, because we know there are dossiers all over the place that if you don't vote a particular way or act a particular way, you're likely to find yourself in hot soup that you don't want to find yourself in. And so we can see this is a systematic race to ensure that impunity wins. And I want to look a little bit at the politics of being a bit more radical. You see, for those of us, and I'm a Gen Xer, and I know there are many Gen Xers here and millennials and so on and so forth, we have gotten so used to the politics of analysis until we're paralyzed, and we talk and we talk and we discuss processes, and which is very important because I believe in a simultaneity of action. But Gen Z has shown us very clearly a pure way and a purist way of addressing some of these issues. They have cut through, and I will echo, was it Molly or somebody, they've cut through the bullshit. And they've said, there's only one way out. And that is Ruto must go, which is Ruto and everything that he represents. He has been deplatformed locally and internationally. We have an opportunity right here to go for the jugular peacefully, not like the brutality that is meted on us by the police, but in a peaceful manner and in a persistent manner, and say that enough is enough, and we want this entire Ruto space, his government, to go home. If we do not do this, and I've been tweeting about it or Xing about it or whatever it is these days, that we need to come on board as Gen Zote. I think many of us have felt a little bit flummoxed, a bit intimidated, some of us who are older, who might not be able to run as fast, and we look at the police and we say, are we going to be able to outrun those rungus or those live bullets? But we have other people's children who are on the streets, who are getting shot, who are getting injured, who are dying, because they have said enough is enough. And the rest of us are prevaricating, going round and round in circles, afraid. You know, it's okay to be nervous, that you need your dose of adrenaline. I'm going to be on the streets tomorrow. And actually, I'm going to be on the streets tomorrow with my children who are Gen Zs, because we cannot be sending other people's children out on the streets to die for us while we endlessly debate what wrong thing was done to us yesterday or the day before yesterday. You know, we have to feel that nervousness, that maji in your stomach. And then you say, we're still going to the streets. Because if we all went there, would they kill us all? We might not be able to run as fast, but we are sending a message clearly. And right now, when we have these spaces and we engage and we talk, there is this feeling that, yeah, wacha tu aongee, because they have understood. Even this swearing in tomorrow at 9 a.m. reminds me of a certain swearing in that happened after the elections that led to the post-election violence. We allow these things to happen. It's very reminiscent, except now you're swearing in CSs. And they know exactly what they're doing. They're mocking us, and they're daring us, and they're feeding us with fear. They're telling us tomorrow it'll be massive deterrence, and we'll have police there, we'll have everybody there. So everyone is like, stay at home. And who are the brave or the foolish ones? Is it the young people from the social justice centers who have so little to live for that they will lose everything? Is it that you and I, in the comfort of our age and the suburbs we live in, can sit back and watch other people fight for us? So my message is to kind of bring together the simultaneity of action that is required. We can speak here on this space, Ndu and Eric, but we also have to take ourselves to the ground where we can, where we're able to, and where we can't, we offer the kind of support, monetary or otherwise. We want to be vigilant, and we want to say from all angles, we are approaching this regime. As I said, Ruto has already deplatformed himself. What else are we waiting for? And if he's willing to hold on to power at any cost, trust me, he will shoot dead more people tomorrow. God forbid it is somebody that we know, or me, or anyone. We don't want another person dead. But in order to avoid this, we need to be able to deliberately come out and say enough is enough. What are we pushing for? Dignity, humanity, and justice. And those are all enshrined in the constitution of this great republic. And I want to just remind all of us and encourage us that at the end of the day, we have the power, we are the sovereign, and we are able to say enough is enough, notwithstanding the rigmarole, the circus, the shenanigans that are shoved down our throats in the name of sham vetting processes and so on and so forth.
Yeah.
So I want to say viva, comrades, viva, and I want to say a luta continua, but we must never let this go, or we shall be stuck for another, I don't know how many years, and Kenya cannot survive that. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you, Jero. I mean, an impassioned presentation there, saying this is where we are at, and it's important for all of us to, as we are thinking about this, think about, so if you are happy with the process, then you sit back. You don't just sit back and relax. You're happy with the process. You're happy with the cabinet secretaries who will be sworn in tomorrow. They go into office. We have a responsibility, and the responsibility remains to make sure that we are checking and demanding accountability for every action, for the job that they've been given, the job that they have to do. If you're not happy with it, then what also do you do?
Exactly.
You can just sit back and say, all right, so I'm not happy with it, so come on.
Yeah. I mean, there's a space for continuous engagement when it comes to this. And I think, unfortunately, we see so many events that take place that have people, captured for a while. And then at the end of that event, everybody just kind of goes back into their cocoons and nobody says anything about it.
Yeah.
But unfortunately, or fortunately, citizen-centric governance requires that you have engagement all of the time.
Yeah.
That you cannot wait for an event like vetting, for example, and then you say, okay, yes, well, we're following the vetting process. We're waiting to see if they'll be sworn in, and there it ends. No. That there is, okay, a new cabinet in place. How are you going to make sure that for the citizen for which this person works, because I think we forget about that all the time. No, they're not in a glorified position whereby now they're cabinet secretaries and 1, 2, 3 happens. No. In a position for which you work for the Kenyan, how are we making sure that on a day-to-day basis, you're doing what you ought? That on a day-to-day basis, we're ensuring that there's no mishap when it comes to your governance in that particular seat. And that means being engaged. It means knowing what your cabinet secretary is doing. It means knowing what your governor is doing, what your member of parliament is doing. And it has to be continuous. It is not an easy task. It is hard work. But that's what it means to ensure that you have a nation for which the people are being worked for and that people are being held accountable. So for me, it is not really a what next. It is a how do you continue?
Yeah.
It
It's a
keeps
how next.
flowing. Exactly. You know, what is how do we do it next? That we've been engaged. I mean, like, you know, Chero says people are coming out to voice this. And I think that there's spaces for conversations to continually be had. That when you stop speaking, you lose your power.
Indeed. Indeed. Many more requests to speak. We're going to try and give as many of you the mic as possible. So let's also limit how much you speak. Abdi, I can see you've requested. I'm going to jump you for a bit until a couple of more new people have spoken. And then maybe Abdi will come to you. The first one I want to go to next is the blind surgeon. This is Frederick Angat 4.
Okay, thank you so much for the opportunity. I want to appreciate you all for what you are doing. I try to speak out, even though I'm suffering maybe from a flu, but I try to be audible. But first and foremost, I want to thank you guys for what you are doing. That actually is a great move, and I really appreciate. There's a war quote that says that you don't need to be a foster general to appreciate this anti-Zil quote from his monumental work on warfare. So actually what I'm trying to mean actually, you are the general, you are the soldiers, you are the one who are fighting, you are the organizers actually. I really appreciate what we are doing, and I know we are going to make it. Second is my submission concerning the CS, the incoming CS actually. To me, I'll say that maybe Ruto is trying to have a deaf ear. He don't want to listen to us. And in war, as I said, there are actually strategies how we fight the war. We are trying to fight this war, and actually our opponent is trying to show some resilience. So I will advise that as we fight this war, let's come up with more strategies that we can try and win this war as much as possible. Ruto is actually trying to give us a deaf ear. So one way of improvising this actually, I will advise, someone mentioned some time back on the same space that we can form another strategy, maybe through democratic election. That is, we organize ourselves. We say that come 2027, these guys must go home. When we say these guys must go home, we mean the whole regime. That is the old generation. That's the presidency, the opposition, and so forth. They should go home. And we set young leadership which can help us achieve our objectives, because it seems that this leadership can listen to us. They can't give us their ears. So I'll advise you guys, as we continue, we should think what we can come up with to fight this war. Another thing I'll advise is that maybe as we go on with this war, let's not give up. Let's continue carrying on with these spaces. They will motivate us. They will keep us going. The moment we will come reluctant, actually we will forget. We remember we are all human beings, and once we are in our comfort zones, we will forget of our objectives. So I suggest that as we continue, guys, let's continue fighting this war. And I believe one day we are going to win. But if actually failing doesn't mean that you won't succeed. Failing will always build you and come back stronger and stronger. Once we fail, actually, at some point, we actually take it as a step actually to take us to the next level. So I suggest that as we continue fighting this war, guys, let's do it the right way. Even tomorrow, as we look forward to come on the streets, actually, I believe that one of our major objectives tomorrow, when we go to the streets, we should actually distract the CS who are going to be sworn in tomorrow from even reaching the State House. So, okay, let's try to wake up tomorrow very early in the morning. Let's occupy the streets. Let's make sure that there are no routes for the vehicles, for these CSS to go to the State House tomorrow. So let's try to distract them, and I believe we are going to win. But otherwise, thank you so
Frederick.
much, and we shall keep talking and sharing a lot. Thank you so much, guys.
Asante sana. James Mukabana James.
Good evening. Am I audible?
Yes.
Yes.
Let's try. I think you have some challenges with your network, but let's try. Okay. Programmer 0 option 43190.
Okay, thank you. In my view, most coming from the people said that the process was flawed. So my view is that if the process was flawed, there is no way it was going to produce a single person who was
Have we lost him?
I think so.
Okay, I think we've lost him. So the next one that we hear from is Berde Savannah Travels. Savannah Travels. Evans Ogada, you have the mic.
Good evening, Eric. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. Go ahead.
Thank you very much. I understand the frustration my country people have with the process that has been completed, but I would like us not to lose hope. We have one last line to try and correct things, and the Sheila Davis and friends from TI know that time and again we have gone to court and we have restored sanity in this country. So Davis, Sheila, and every other person who presented petitions, let's converge, let's discuss off this platform. Let us look at the substantive and procedural deficiencies with this process, because it was just a show to pass what was required to be passed. So let's go and ask our questions in court, and let's be ready to go all the way. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Sheila, Executive Director, TI Kenya. What next? What do we do from here?
Thank you very much, Eric. And it's interesting listening to everyone, all the observations, and even the message of hope from Advocate Evans Ogada. Thank you very much for giving us hope. And I still believe, yes, that as I said, and I think even Karanja Matindi has said, that the Constitution is very resilient. And for me, for as long as we have the Constitution, that means that as it rightly says under Article 1, all sovereign power belongs to the people of Kenya. And so for me, in terms of the way forward, yes, now that the National Assembly, of course, fails to overturn the Public Appointments Committee's approval of the individuals who I think Kenyans had raised issues and concerns on, including those who were in breach of, the leadership and integrity tenets. Of course, we feel that the Parliament has, basically abrogated, their oath to uphold and defend the Constitution, particularly provisions of Chapter 6. And I've seen I heard your announcement, Eric, that I think the swearing in is tomorrow at 9 a.m. Well, we still have exactly 12 hours to call upon the president not to proceed with it and do the formal appointment of those with issues. But I think it's important, especially because it's the same president who 2 weeks ago, as he was appointing, the same statement that made this, I think, the chunk of appointments, gave a raft of anti-corruption measures that he was going to undertake to improve the fight against corruption. One including, he made proposals in regard to amendments to the Evidence Act, the Penal Code, to expedite the hearing and determination and even the investigation and prosecution of corruption cases. He talked about the need to embed whistleblower protection provisions in the Witness Protection Act. He talked about the need to pass a solid conflict of interest law. But then the question then again was, but with these commitments that you're saying in regard to the fight against corruption, why are you still giving us people who are tainted, people who have questions. And why can't you just simply allow these people to go through the full course of the criminal justice system before appointing them? There are many other people who can do the job. We are not saying that they are guilty because, again, because of natural justice principles, you're presumed innocent until proven guilty. But for such office, you need very high threshold for leadership and integrity, and it's proper that you just let these people be cleared properly before you appoint them. I mean, if they're cleared, well and good. So I think that is a bit disappointing, and we still must insist that the leadership and integrity provisions are not just there to make our constitution, or they're not ornamental. They're there for a reason. And I think as Kenyans, as someone has said, we have recourse, we have an opportunity to challenge this vetting process, particularly looking at issues in regard to Chapter 6. Especially because, as you said, the committee seems to have ignored the submissions made by the members of the public through the memoranda, that was submitted, information on specific nominees with issues. And there's an opportunity to question and challenge even that process of public participation. We've talked about the time that has been given, how much time were people given to give their submissions, what happened to their submissions, were they included in the same manner that the finance bill was challenged, the finance bill of 2023. If you look at the judgment, one of the issues is that question around public participation, the chief public participation. So this is another a matter that is also touching on issues around public participation. On way forward on the wealth declarations, as I said earlier, now the Public Officers Ethics Act requires that public officers within 30 days after leaving service are required to file declarations to give the current state of their status of their income, their assets, their liabilities. So we expect that the previous former cabinet secretaries by now should have filed their status of income, assets, and liabilities as they left office. I think they were fired on was it the 11th of August thereabout? So it's almost 30
July.
days. By now they should be filing to the Public Service Commission as they left office, what was their current status. But this needs to be verified. The challenge is these are filed, they're put in an envelope, no one really checks that information until now someone is coming for this vetting process, and then we hear them give certain figures. They actually need to be verified, and we need now those are some of the things that we need to check. And for me, one of the reforms that we need to make in the wealth declaration system is include a process of verification so that we are able to check against any inflated or underdeclared assets or income. And one of the other things that we need to do actually is also be very clear on which institution is verifying, because as it is now, yes, you file to the Public Service Commission, but it's not clear who's verifying. What is the role of the EACC in regard to this, and what needs to happen between from the moment someone is nominated and the time they actually appear for vetting in regard to their wealth declarations. And the last point, I think, because this issue around lifestyle audits has been so key with the concerns around opulence and people questioning whether people are validly or whatever people are showing off is legitimately earned. I think it's now really time to look at the question around the lifestyle audit. And we need to define various aspects of the lifestyle audit exercise, which institution spearheads the lifestyle audits, how do you verify this information and these processes, and so that at the end of it, we are able to have a process and actions that will be undertaken that can be able to determine, that discrepancy between, a person's standard of living and the property and income that has been filed and legitimately earned by, the declarant, the public officer. So for me, those are critical things that we now must do moving forward, just observing this current process and looking at the issues that we have raised on, the persons that have held this cabinet secretary and even basically public office positions in the last 1 year or so. Thank you.
Sheila, I want to ask a question. Are we saying that right now, as the law stands, there's no clear way of establishing a person's true wealth? That once they self-declare, it's put in an envelope, it's kept. There's no expectation on any agency to go ahead and verify. Once somebody leaves public office and then they come and say, all right, at the point of exit, this was my wealth, that there's no expectation placed on any institution to go ahead and verify that. Is that what you're saying?
But that hasn't been happening, Eric. That's a reality. That's not happening. You see, like now,
Is it in
for
law?
instance, the cabinet secretary the cabinet secretaries give the information to the Public Service Commission. So what has been happening is at the point where there are questions or aspersions cast on, and especially where investigations are happening on certain individuals, ESCC requests for that information from the relevant commission. You know, Public Service Commission for those working in, say, the executive, Parliamentary Service Commission for, you know, members of parliament, Teacher Service Commission if it's someone employed in the, you know, is a teacher. So ESCC can request for that information, but that process is actually not quite clear within the law. It should be automatic, that when you file a declaration, you don't wait for someone to have an issue before you now start going back and picking what they have filed. It should just be automatic, and there should be a clear process. You file after every 2 years. Within this number of days, there's an institution that is charged with actually verifying what you have filed, instead of waiting for someone to have an issue or an investigation, or, you know, someone to be nominated to a certain office before you now start, you know, scampering to look for, you know, what did they file? You know, can we go back and check? You know, it just needs to be very clear and within a specified timeline, and give a specific institution to have that information checked.
Okay. So thank you very much for that submission. I want to hear from Davis Malombe. Davis, what's the way forward? Everybody's saying, okay, so this is here where we are at. We feel unhappy with the process. We feel unhappy with the nominees who are going to be appointed tomorrow. We know there can be several sorts of forms of recourse. You had mentioned one of them being litigation. But then, practically, so what would be the next steps for litigation? If people thought would like to go and challenge, how would they come together? How maybe do you have a platform that would be able to open and say, as Kenya Human Rights Commission, we want to welcome people to come in and join us in this, and maybe even bring ideas on what areas of the law or the process we need to challenge in court. Davis?
Yeah, thank you, Eric. And I think this issue also came up during the last convening, where Professor Migai also indicated clearly that from the beginning, this process is shambolic, and there is clear end point in terms of legal action. Evans Ogada has also indicated in the same terms of looking at the substantive and also procedural aspects of the vetting. So we are going to organize this and also see whether it's also possible to beat the deadline, because we understand the swearing in is tomorrow, and also politically we know once some of this process then happen, it can be difficult also to reverse the fact. So we want to see whether it's possible to have a quick turnaround this, and I think after this we can have a different discussion. There are certain things we cannot discuss in this meeting, so that we also don't disadvantage our legal strategy. But I also concur with the Cherotich and others that the biggest problem is political by nature, not just legal. And we also need to think about this. And of course, the problem is the presidency, because this whole capture and culture of impunity is being entrenched by the president, by controlling parliament and by controlling other institutions, and also by not also listening to the people of Kenya, despite all the political investment the young people are put into this. We should not lose hope, because as I always say, Kenyans have a long history of political rebellion and resistance, and we should bank on this. And one of the other things we should also not forget is about the elections in 2027, because I think if you look at the way the appointments were done by bringing Joho, Oparanya, and others, I think part of that was also to consolidate regional votes in Western Kenya, in Coast and other places, which means then this culture of controlling people and being unaccountable, there's a plan to sustain it beyond 2027. Which means then we need to have a bigger strategy of consolidation and also action beyond now. And this is also something we have started convening around. Today we had a meeting in the morning somewhere to also look into this. So those would be my suggestion. And also not forgetting, we are also dealing with other problems around this protest, which are yet to be resolved. People have been killed. There's no justice. The killers have not been held to account. So we also need to look at all these things in a long-term perspective and ensure that there's justice and accountability for what is happening right now, but also moving forward towards 2027. So the quest for freedom and justice and dignity should be sustained, and also use the Constitution of Kenya to ensure that good governance and also respect for human rights is enhanced. So I think we should remain strong, but there are other things which cannot be discussed in this meeting. And I think tomorrow, because there's a whole Occupy intervention, I think this should also focus on the rejection of these criminals which have been adopted for appointment by the president. Those would be my perspectives for now. Thank you.
Thank you, Davis. We will hear later from Kawibe Wambua as we come to conclude. But let's get another round of submissions from the public, from those who are joining in. Let's start with Western Shilaho. Go first, and then we'll get from Boniface.
Thank you so much, Eric. Greetings to fellow compatriots on the platform. What I wish to say is that listening to some of the previous speakers, I will use this analogy. I'm afraid we're dissipating a lot of energy chasing after lizards, and it seems we're scared of the crocodile. We think the crocodile, because it may look like the lizard, they're the same, they're not the same. The problem is not these individuals who are nominated and they've been subjected to that charade called the vetting process, and now they'll be appointed tomorrow. The problem is President William Ruto, the president. That's where the problem lies. So it doesn't matter, really, as long as you don't confront the crocodile, you are not going to solve anything. And it's well and good to invoke the law, the Constitution, 2010, but the law is as good as the morality and ethics and values that undergird those who hold public office. It is moral rectitude that gives life to the Constitution. The Constitution does not fix moral depravity amongst the political elite. And the law is inherently political, not only in Kenya, it's across the world. So to imagine that you can use the law to fix this institutional impunity by William Ruto and his acolytes, which has been there for the last 60 odd years, is a little bit naive. I think it's naive because it's not going to work. Those who know something will tell you the law is an instrument of power. It's an instrument of power. And those who want to engage in nefarious actions, abuse power, they first must interfere with the rule of law. You go there, they'll give you some date, some mention, some ruling that's wishy-washy, or they rule against William Ruto. How do you implement that? He has got the instrument of violence. How are you going to implement it? Well, suppose they rule that these nominees shouldn't hold office after he's sworn them tomorrow. What do you do? What are you going to do? So we're dealing with a political elite that is rogue, couldn't care less about the collective well-being of Kenyans. They still believe they're feudal lords. And Kenyans are subjects, they're not citizens, they've got no rights. The law applies to ordinary Kenyans, mere mortals. The law does not apply to them. Parliament has no shame, acting as an appendage of the executive, doing the bidding of William Ruto. I'm yet to be persuaded that you can deal with these problems by going to court. You won't. And what the Gen Zs are planning to do tomorrow, it's what other societies do when they're in the morass we find ourselves in as Kenyans. When you find yourself in a state whereby the government is illegitimate and continues, doubles down the road of impunity, of callousness, of plunder, there's no way out. That government has to be extirpated. You have to uproot it so that you get a government that upholds the rule of law, and everybody else will uphold the rule of law. But if you have people who don't uphold the rule of law, It's lawlessness.
Thank you,
It's just lawlessness. It doesn't matter. It becomes a mere piece of paper. Chapter, Eric, just to land, chapter 6 about integrity. That chapter is dead in the water. It's been dead in the water for long. 2013, when we had people who are facing egregious charges before the ICC to run for president and occupied presidency, one then subsequently succeeded by the deputy. It doesn't matter what you do. You will just mere mortals. But at the highest office, we've had people who did not have what it takes to hold public office. What do you do about that? What are you going to do about that? You have to reset this decayed state, this colonial state that finds legitimacy from outside as opposed to the people of Kenya.
Okay.
You have to reset it, you have to uproot it before you get things working in Kenya.
Point made.
Thank you.
Point made, Shilaho. Asante sana.
Eric.
Abdi.
I'm on an airport Wi-Fi. Can I go?
Go ahead.
Okay. Thank you for organizing the space. I'm just joining you from Schiphol Airport on my way to Nairobi, waiting to capture a flight. That's why I've been dropping every time.
Karibu.
But can you hear me before I go?
Yes.
Okay. I will start by saying that it's now crystal clear. The political elites have banded together, consolidating power, trapping us in the same vicious cycle, like a hamster in a wheel. The unanimous approval of the cabinet secretary nominee, except one by Parliament, is a glaring indicator of the deeper problem. Our representatives appear disconnected from their duty to serve the public interest, is a rubber stamping approach to undermine public trust in our political institutions and erode our foundations of our democracy. Eric, to be honest, we have no use for Parliament in Kenya. It's a waste of our resources to fund an entity that functions merely as an extension of the executive. Our current parliamentary system has failed to provide the necessary checks and balance, making it redundant and ineffective. With the public outcry, the only sacrificial lamb was the vetting of Stella Soy, which lacked the required, they say she lacked understanding and skill of the gender docket. This was sham. Many candidates lacked the prerequisite qualification with questionable background and integrity and were also considered. I'm even told that some had preview of what was to be asked. On your people verdict survey, it revealed a striking disapproval of all cabinet nominees, highlighting a significant demand of change. I think if I looked at the percentage, was 91.3% of Kenyans opposed the nominee. This was an overwhelming rejection from that sample, and they were frustrated with the current administration. So I will say that Parliament has not conducted its affairs with respect, dignity, and decorum that the public deserve. By neglecting, I will say, by neglecting to honor the law and the constitution document they pledge to uphold and protect, they display a disturbing level of hypocrisy. This erosion of trust undermines our faith in democratic institutions, undermines the pressing need for real accountability and integrity in our legislative practice. It's for this precise reason we need to restore credibility, and those that in power truly represent the will and values and the values of the people. In Parliament, it seems there is a blunt disregard for people's verdict, submission, or public participation. It's apparent the institution is compromised, ready to approve anything that comes its way, whether it's a flawed legislation or tainted by corruption. They will dress it up, apply some polish, pass it without concern. Each MP seems to have a price tag. It's a free market. Just how much your representative is worth in that house. It's a bid to the highest bidder. We saw during the vetting process, even somebody watching a clip of people playing rugby. It's just a show of a sham. The whole process was. They were so bored to that extent that their bid had already been paid. Was a formality. We really deserve leaders who are accountable, committed to genuine oversight. This is my thought. Instead, we are left with Parliament that fails to critically evaluate nominees, acting as a compliant body and a guardian of the public trust. This is the stark reminder of the consequences of electing corrupt leaders who prioritize their personal gains over the welfare of the people. They have become irredeemable in systems that no longer serves its citizens. I'll speak to the wealth declaration, actually. And I come from Ontario in Canada, where Sunshine List is publicly disclosed salaries of public service over earning over 100,000 annually. If you look up even Abdi in Kenya today, you'll see what I made every year. Kenya should adopt a similar open book approach to ensure transparency of public officers. Way forward. We have been talking about conservative management of the cancer symptoms, not the cure. One of the ladies says, "Tutadu what?" This is what we will do. The only viable solution is to disband the current parliament and all its surrogate branches, hold a new election. This is the cure to rebuild trust, restore integrity in our governance structure, uphold the rule of law. As citizens, we must declare no vote of confidence in this institution. We demand immediate dismantle to this corrupt system, pave way for leaders who truly represent and safeguard our interests. I will say, as I always say, let's pull the plug, bring it down. We donated power to them. We decided to take it back. Thank you, Eric.
Thank you very much, Abdi. Next speaker, to Kennedy. Kennedy Ounda.
Thank you, Eric. Good evening, everyone. Eric, I don't have much to say, but I want to ask you people. We want Mr. President to go. Do we have any plan? Who is going to take over? That's what I want them to, particularly the lawyers in the house. If the president goes, do we leave it for Gachagua? The agencies, do we have someone who can take this country from point A to point B? And my play is that there is a cabinet now. From tomorrow, we'll have a cabinet in place. Can we give them time, even for 2 months? We see if they can deliver. If they don't deliver, we go back to the streets. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Well, there was no call actually on this space at all,
right?
For like evict the president immediately and all. But it's, if things do not happen, then what is the recourse, right?
Yeah.
It's what's the recourse then if what people feel should happen does not happen.
Right.
Yeah.
Where are Kenyans' minds in terms of what ought to happen, where what you were hoping or in your opinion should have gone differently didn't actually occur?
Yeah.
Then what? I think that is the question that was being asked tonight, that where is your mind? Where are the conversations going now, futurely, whereby if the majority were in the thought that, this set of 22 should not have actually been approved, then what?
Yeah.
And how will you engage moving forward?
We take 2 more speakers and then we hear from Kaiva Wambua as we close. The first one will be Mtumishi Odoromogi.
Thank you very much, Eric, and I'm so happy to join this space. So what next? So allow me to first say that look at the speed at which the appointments of these dealers and criminals, is moving in terms of making sure that they get into the office. That speed itself is suspect. And basically what they're trying to do is, whenever these persons are going to the office, then that will be the end of it. And when coming to the integrity issues, I'm one person who actually even came up, apart from a memorandum, I actually had a video talking about the issue of some of them, including, for example, Joho, in terms of Kenya National Examination Council at that time, actually came out and talked of him forging a certificate. But to my surprise, this time, the same body actually now came out and said, he's actually clean and there's no forging at all. And actually what he has done is that the certificate is actually valid. But let's not forget, because I come from the academia, is that when you get a D-, then there is what you ought to do for you then to go until a degree, including a certificate and a diploma. That was not shown, and what we've now been told, and everyone is lying to us, that actually now is a good example to people outside there that is even doing a master's in one of the prestigious universities outside there. The likes of Oparanya, and let me not talk about it because it's in the public domain. Now, the biggest problem is not these persons. The biggest problem is Mr. Ruto. And I totally support Gerotich that the only way, for me, I don't think the courts are the recourse. The only way is to go back to the streets tomorrow, because what I've realized is occupying some of these places that they think they have secured are better, and using what the power that belongs to us by occupying some of these places, including parliament. Let's not fear by saying so. Then they will feel what we are saying. Because I can tell you, even if we go to court, no one is going to listen. The best way is to go back to the streets and occupy everything in parliament. That is the best way. And let's not try to to pamper here and there and say, we didn't want to call. My call, and I'm sure these are a number of calls, a number of Kenyans are thinking the same, is that the entire regime ought to go. And the best way it can go is the president and his entire regime to be actually removed from power by the power of the people. Not going to courts, but by force, come out of State House and leave this place. And lastly, as I finish, Eric and team, there is, if you look at the shenanigan and what was happening in parliament, to an extent of some of them, you could see some of the nominees were actually being assisted by the same members of parliament that were interviewing them. What does that one tell you? It basically tells you that these persons get into these positions for deals. And if you are very keen today, one member of parliament, I think 201, a lady, actually came out and she actually said that I'm here as one of the voices that will not be heard here, but I'm sure Kenyans will hear that this, what you are doing is that, actually, these were her words, I'm being cheated. And what we've seen is that the people have been cheated and there's no way out of it. We go other country way by removing Mr. Ruto and the entire regime to go home. Thank you. Back to you, Eric.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. So then the final speaker before we get to the closing remarks would be, they dropped off actually. Tumishi was going to be the last one. So they dropped off. Okay, so let's get now the closing remarks here from Kawiva. Kawiva Wambua, you've heard what the people are saying. You've heard this evening, and you can see also I've shared. This is an update from State House spokesperson Hussein Mohammed. The president has today appointed the 19 cabinet secretaries who were approved by Parliament. They've already been appointed. The Gazette notice has been signed. So tomorrow morning, they are then sworn in as cabinet secretaries. So the wheel is moving. The wheel is moving, Kawiva.
Eric, thank you very much, and thank you for the speakers who have spoken. I want us to go back to history and remember what happened in 2007. I was in KICC when Kivuito was whisked to State House to go and give resource and swear the president. We know what happened in Kenya. That kind of speed in itself talks to the fact that something is being hidden. That kind of speed basically is saying, you shut up, you don't know what it is that means to run a government, let us run it for you and we will do it whether you like it or not. So basically, Ruto, in getting Raila and his cohorts there and in getting Parliament to go through this charade and getting, because it's just paperwork, petition, let's go. So the overarching idea, overarching notion that we are getting is that Kenyan voices do not really matter. The political elite and their consensus are enough, and anybody else out there can go and basically that's what they are saying. Let us also remember the Constitution of Kenya, Article 3 says that there is no other way of establishing government apart from through the provisions of this constitution. So we ask ourselves several questions. One of the key things in the constitution is public participation. As the establishment of this government, the actions of Ruto and the parliament and all that, do they follow the constitution? No. Have the actions of the various of the when you're looking at accountability for public servants, the question of integrity, has it been followed? No. So which constitution is this government following to establish itself? Not our constitution. So actually, I think we need to charge this government as being an illegitimate government which has been established in other ways apart from the provisions of this constitution. I think that's where we begin. That our constitution is not being implemented, it is not being followed in the establishment of this government. The only thing the only aspect of the law which is being followed is the fact that the IEBC and the Supreme Court declared the president and deputy president-elect as properly elected. That was contested, but that declaration sort of was the end of the road. That's the only aspect. Everything else is not. So we are establishing a government outside the purview or outside the understanding of the constitution, which is something that we need to critically look at and say, how do we proceed? I have heard Kennedy, one of the speakers called Kennedy asking people, who is in the leaders in the Gen Z? How are we going to proceed? If the president goes, who will lead us? Let us refer to the constitution and say, people first should not sell to us fear that there is going to be a vacuum, there's going to be a lacuna, that there is going to be a problem in this country or anarchy. No. The constitution is clear on what needs to happen if Ruto goes, if Rigathi goes, if Wetangula goes. There is a provision for how the citizens, in exercising their power, can establish a government. And this should not be misconstrued. The going away of Ruto or whichever government it is does not mean this country will burn, that there will be anarchy. No, the constitution provides for smooth mechanisms, including elections that will ensure that there is no lacuna in governance. Tusiuziwe woga as Kenyans, and I think that should be very clear. So the only option for us now as a country, because there is elite consensus, the thieves are in it together. Everybody thinks that because now the opposition is a broad government, then every Kenyan will keep quiet. No, that's not the reason why Gen Zs went to the street. That's not the reason why Kenyans are up in arms against the actions of the government. The reason is 1, service delivery; 2, runaway corruption; 3, lack of legislative oversight; 4, the fact that there is overtaxation without representation, that basic services in education and health are not being offered, and that the constitution is not being implemented. Those are the key issues that we have pointed out. And these issues, we must fight for them. There is no other way of getting the Kenya that we want unless we are willing and able to get out and say, we demand that certain things be done. There have been comments by Kenyans who have been saying that, the prayers of Kenyans are being answered in Bangladesh and in other places. Let us know that this country is ours. And when we are saying we want to get a cleanup, you cannot come with an oily mop, like what Ruto has come with and said that you're doing cleaning, and then we let you. No. The fact that integrity, the fact that governance is a problem in this country must be met with citizen organizing through all means. The courts, the streets, the continuous engagement out of these spaces. And for me, I am a big proponent of Operation Pokonya Mike. We should not have media houses. We should not have villages in funerals, in churches, giving opportunity to these people to continue lying to us and to continue short-circuiting our governance process and daring us to ask, what can you do? Because that's what the president is doing. Why are we hurrying to do things outside the law when we know that there is a requirement in the constitution that we follow the law? So we should know that Kenyans, we are on our own, and we have to organize this country and organize, and by demanding that the exit of the president and his government, we are not calling for anarchy. We are calling for sanity. We are calling for cleanup of the system. And that should be the posture that we get. And people should not be worried that by saying Ruto must go, there is going to be a problem at all. Because the constitution provides for ways in which if Ruto or any other president goes, that matter is dealt with. Okay. Thank you.
Great note to end on. Thank you very much. Kavio Wambua, thanks for also being part of our panel of speakers this evening. Kavio Wambua, the Deputy Executive Director of Inuka Sisi, Sheila Masinde, the Executive Director of Transparency International Kenya, and Davis Malombe, the Executive Director of the Kenya Human Rights Commission. Thank you all for being part of this space tonight. One thing rings clear, that the conversations must continue in terms of what next. Tomorrow will be an interesting day as those cabinet secretaries are sworn and into office, and then we see what happens in terms of the next steps. But also thank you all for being part of this space tonight. As we've spoken, as we've shared thoughts and insights, it continues that citizens must be part of the conversations and their governance. Until we talk again, good night.
I've ended the space.